I wanted to allow enough time for everybody to get set up and ready for our evening call. I think we have quite a few people have connected, so I'm gonna get started with my little commercial. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we're really thrilled that this community Zoom call continues to be very well attended and very popular. We've ranged from anywhere from 25 to 50 people who've attended, not just signed up, but actually attended. And on an evening like this, as you can see, I'm out on my deck with my beautiful tree behind me. I don't blame you if you made another choice, but thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and I think it really does help connect us. During this pandemic, we've had to adapt, as you all know, as many organizations have had to do. We've gone completely virtual as we meet with our clients at Wings for Widows, and it's challenging because working through financial issues and paperwork is something that's kind of hard to do by holding it up to the screen. So it's been something that that has really stretched us, but also given us some new opportunities. And very soon I want to, probably not tonight, but I want to tell you about our founder and director, Chris Bentley's new workbook that he has just developed, and that will be coming out very soon. And it'll be a great tool for us to use with our clients. So once again, if you know anyone who is struggling with new widowhood, or an organization or group that we could get in front of to tell our story about what we do, we would be more than happy to do that. We really want to share the story of Wings for Widows and get people the help that they need in a timely way. I know that all of us feel like it's a struggle to go through the death of a spouse. Some of us were caregivers for many years or many months or even just several days. I actually feel like it was a gift that my husband died very suddenly and quickly with no warning. At the time, I didn't think so, because I thought, oh my goodness, I wish I'd had time to, go through things with him and talk about things. But the pain of seeing someone suffer for a long time is probably worse. Although you can't really measure, can you? Well, tonight we have a wonderful speaker. Pastor Steve Zehr is coming on to tell us the story of his struggle to care for his wife for 30 years while raising their two daughters and working full-time. And I know it's a poignant story, and I want to give him the full amount of time that he can use. Following Steve's talk, we're going to have Mark Gassner, who is our tax accountant for Wings for Widows, and he's so cute and so young. I can't believe he's an accountant, but he is. Anyway, so I will give Steve this half hour. Please mute your device if you haven't already, and allow Steve the time to talk. If there is time for questions, we'll go ahead and take those by using the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you, Steve, for coming on, and I'll let you tell your story.
Well, thank you. I have told the story before, but not officially. So this is really kind of the first time that I'm telling a group. I was married for almost 36 years to a woman named Susie. And when we met, she was an actress. We met in Florida. We were both actors, and I'm a musician as well. And so she was, if any of you remember the show Miami Vice, she was on a couple episodes of Miami Vice, and she had been in the Screen Actors Guild for 20 years. And so she had done really quite well in it. And we just had a great meeting. Together we laughed so much, and we were just so like-minded. We were a perfect fit, people said. And I was aware that she had struggled with a little bit of OCD. And if you don't, I don't know if you've heard of OCD, but it means obsessive compulsive disorder. A lot of people have that, fear of germs or, things like that. And many people manage through life very easily with that. And that's really all I knew when we got married. And we had, I would say, 7 really wonderful years together of just laughing, and we had our kids in there. But after our second child was born, her mental illness began to increase. Now, I don't know if that was because of hormones or what, but she began to get pretty depressed most of the time. And the OCD did get worse. And we just didn't know what to do. We knew nothing about mental illness. This was in the early 90s, late 80s. And so it was, all I knew about that was from the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and, knew pretty dramatic things about mental illness, but really was not aware of it. We went to a counselor who began to tell us about what mental illness was really about, and that we needed to go see a psychiatrist. So we went to see a psychiatrist, and she was diagnosed right off the bat with Tourette's syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is, but that in dramatic cases, that's where people they'll have a tic, but then they'll blurt out something, usually like obscenities or something that's inappropriate for the moment. She really didn't have those blurting out things. She had a tic, and every time that she would tic, she would sniff. And because of that noise that was made, he said that is associated with Tourette syndrome. But he was using that as an umbrella term, saying that she has other things, but we don't know what that all is. Well, the depression got worse, and as it did get worse, he felt like she needed to go into a facility. So she went into a mental facility for the first time. I would say my youngest daughter was probably maybe 2 or 3, something like that. And my oldest was 4, probably 2 years older than that. And it was kind of horrific, not because it was so awful, they were treating her badly, but just because it's very invasive as a strip search, and you go through all of this stuff. It's very humiliating, and so it was a pretty traumatic time for us. Little did I know that was only going to be the first. We went through a long period of probably 28 years of in and out of mental institutions, pages and pages of medications, trying to find the right cocktail of medications. And there were some great times in there with real highs, and then some real lows. And through all of that, she was then diagnosed with bipolar disorder as well. Well, all those things can easily be treated with medication, but she had a really horrible childhood. And I don't know if any of you saw the movie Mommy Dearest about Joan Crawford. That was kind of her life growing up. Her mother was also mentally ill, and when her mother was at work, she would have to stay with her grandparents, who were just the opposite of OCD cleanliness. They were so messy and dirty that they never changed the sheets. They just put new ones on. They had a pot next to the bed so they didn't have to go use the restroom. There were cigarette butts all over the place. It was a filth, pigsty. And then she would go from there into her mother's house, which was sterile. And she never had any real safe place growing up. And so she never learned how to deal with life struggles. And all she knew was these dramatic differences in life. And she just didn't know how to deal with life. And that was really the foundational thing that made everything so amplified. She was eventually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder as well, schizoaffective disorder, and of course the depression, the clinical depression. So there were 5 different things that they were trying to treat with medication. And she was in and out of hospital, mental hospitals. She went in about 4 times. She attempted suicide 5 times. One of the times she was found by my oldest daughter, who was about 12 at the time. She was in the, Susie was in the bathtub with a knife, and she was calling out for her daughter. She ran in, saw her mom in the bathtub with a knife, wanting to cut her wrists, and she talked her down at 12 years old, got the knife out of her hands, dried her off, and got her in bed, and she had her laying down on her lap. So my daughter has been a mother to my wife for many years. I was basically, through basically 28 years, I was both mother and father to my kids, because my wife, she was really a wonderful person. If you got to know her, she was funny, she was very talented, but behind the scenes, she just could not function in life. She had a very hard time taking care of the kids. Our marriage was very, very one-sided. It was me basically taking care of her almost like a daughter. But at times she didn't want to be a daughter. Sometimes she wanted me to be like a father to her and take care of her. And other times she really wanted me as her husband. And it was very difficult for me to make that switch all the time. And even one of the counselors told me, one of the many counselors, that I needed to stop trying to be her counselor, but to just be her husband. And that was a relief, but it was not easily done, because she was always still coming to me with her problems every single night even. And she would fall asleep because the medication tired her out. But after she would tell me all her problems right before we go to bed, I was lying there with my eyes wide open and I couldn't sleep. And that was really common. So I was sleep deprived a lot as well. But I had to take care of the kids, take care of the house, cook, do most of the cooking. I did have a full-time job. For 35 years, I've been on staff at a church somewhere doing the music. And I was ordained in the Southern Baptist Church, but I've worked in Presbyterian churches and evangelical free churches. But because of me being on staff, I was also in a glass house. And everyone knew that something was not quite right. In the first church I was at, they were extremely supportive. Understand now, because of the schizoaffective disorder, she was hearing loud voices in her head, and they were always blasphemous, or basically words saying, hurt your husband, hurt your kids. I'm surprised that through all that, I never really felt in danger, really, or the kids, because I knew in her heart that she would never, ever, ever want to do any of that. But she still, the residue of that was that she blamed her mother and me for her mental illness most of the time. And it was only like in the last 5 or 6 years that she stopped doing that. So during that long period of time, I was taking care of her. And when I say taking care of her, she would call me probably 2 or 3 times a week at the office, and I would have to leave because she was having a panic attack, and I would have to go and calm her down and then go back to work. And then I would pick up the kids from school, and it was God ordained that I was able to teach part-time at the school that they were at, so that I could get them. It was a private Christian school, and they were able to get a really good education, and I was able to know all their teachers and really be heavily involved in their life, which was just a blessing from God. There were many, many, many blessings from God in all of this, but she was sometimes verbally abusive because she blamed me or her mom. She was always looking for someone to blame for her mental illness, and she didn't really take ownership of it. Even though she did try to get help, she still was always blaming someone until, like I say, the last 5 years, suppose, of her life. So in that time, the girls and I became very, very close because we obviously were retreating to each other, for comfort and all of that. And Susie was in bed a great deal. She would sometimes even still get work going on castings and be on a television commercial here or there, but they didn't know about anything. So she was able to still act occasionally. And then she tried to do some part-time jobs too, but it just eventually would not work, and she was able to collect disability insurance. So it was extremely difficult also because her mother was mentally ill, and the only family she had was us. So I was basically dealing with two mentally ill people who did not get along and loved each other, but they didn't get along. They fought all the time. And her mother was not a believer, and her language was usually extremely visceral and foul. And one time I even had to kick her out of the house because she was calling Susie too many foul names. And I said, I'm not going to have that here. And she had to leave. But it was, she was so problematic that it was hard for the girls as well. It was their grandma and their mom. And I was the only one that offered any kind of stability. I would normally feel, as I look back, I'm surprised I didn't feel more pressure than I did. But I have to tell you that through all of that time, the Lord was closer to me than I have ever experienced. There would be times that I would be just so angry at God, or I would be just hurting so much inside, but yet I'd still have to do my job and get up in front of people and say, praise the Lord, and lead people in singing. And that was very difficult. And I am a very transparent person, and I would tend to share, some things that were going on. And the first church particularly was just so gracious to me and so kind. And I would, during the week, I would go to the piano and just sing psalms and just cry out to God. And I'm telling you, don't ever tell anybody, or don't let anybody tell you that you can't have a very real, personal experience with God. He was extremely real to me. And he brought comfort to me in more ways than I can describe. Not only just personally in my quiet time, but through so many people. And he would bring just the right people into my life at just the right time. There were so many people that comforted her and loved on her and counseled her in the first church when we first found out about it all. We did think it was demonic, to be honest with you, at the beginning, because the words were blasphemous and they were all against God and things that were just hateful and evil. And so we've had internationally known healers pray for her and talk with her, and nothing was working. And it just kept going on and on and on. And we did move we were in Florida at the time. I lived in South Florida in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area for 23 years. And Susie was born and raised in Miami. So at one time, after her mother had passed away, we just really wanted to get out of that area. Not just to kind of start over, but it just was getting very crowded and we just wanted to start over. So we moved to Minnesota. I wasn't thinking I'd move to Siberia when I wanted to move north, but a church opened up in Lakeville, Minnesota, and we went there. And that was the third church that I had been in. I had been in a rather large church also in Florida, which was about 1,800 people. And again, some people would see and know that I was going through something, but a lot of people in that larger church tended to just think she was crazy and stay away from her. That was very painful. I wanted people to love her like I did. But the church is not really good necessarily of dealing with mental health issues, as a lot of people aren't. And I don't even fault them terribly with that. It's just, you don't know what to do. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so you don't talk to that person, or you don't, you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. And I totally understand that. But I really hope that the church will begin to learn. People will begin to learn about mental illness and begin to love on people with mental illness. For me, I would say probably 5 years before she passed away, I really had lost all emotional connection with her. She was not a person I married at all. She basically didn't even show much expression. The kids felt like they didn't have a mom anymore. And because of that, I think that she was losing hope in life, period, and even a desire to live. She caught pneumonia 2 years ago, and this would be the third time that she had caught pneumonia, but this time, I think that she just didn't really have the will to live. And she ended up in the ICU for a month. We tried to extubate her several times. One of the times that we took the tube out and tried to see if she could live on, breathe on her own, she almost yelled at me in the voice that she couldn't, said, "It's my body," meaning I'm sure that she just wanted to go, and we finally decided after a month that she would never be able to live off of a ventilator, and so we decided to let her go. That took 30 minutes. And that was a terrible 30 minutes. But I have to say, I find a lot of comfort knowing that she is happy and dancing. She was a dancer, trained dancer. She was very, very talented at it. And I just know that she's dancing in heaven now. And that brings me a lot of comfort. The girls and I really struggled to some degree because we had been taking care of her. I had obviously been doing the greatest amount of care. But when she passed, I had a sense of relief. That may sound horrible, but I was just wore out from taking care of her and never seeing her happy, and I couldn't make her happy. And I felt comfort that she was gone and that she was happy. And it's been a little bit of a hard time me finding my own self again, because if you're a caretaker for that long, that was part of my identity, But the Lord has really helped me to begin in 2 years to develop my own identity and to kind of be on a new path. I don't know where that path is going to go exactly, but I really feel a great deal of hope that the Lord has something else planned for me. About a year ago, I felt like the Lord was telling me to write everything out that I went through. I told the Lord, I'm not a writer. I'm not good at this. I really can't do that He's going to have to, in some way, confirm that that's what I'm supposed to do. So then after I had prayed that prayer, then I opened the devotional I was in that day, and it was by Henry Nouwen. And it was the devotional was on, you need to write your story and tell people about what you've been through so that they can encourage others. So I did. I started writing, and I finished this manuscript about a year ago and submitted it to a publisher and was just accepted a couple weeks ago. So maybe that's part of what the Lord has for me. I don't know, but I am open to whatever He has. And I can tell you that God has a plan for us. While we were married, yes. If we were caregivers for a long time, yes. Even though they may have been abusive, yes. But He also has a plan now for us. whether that's anything big or whether it's just meaning that we're going to find a new purpose in our life and a new role. God has us in his hand. And I know that not everybody on here are Christians, and that's okay. I'm just telling you my personal experience. And God has been incredibly close to me. In the 28 years, we had people giving us money because we at one point didn't have insurance, and we were just in need all the time, it felt like. But when I look back, it was probably over $200,000 was given to us. And because of that, we were able to, I'm not in debt. I mean, the fact that God just kept me in his hand the whole time. And he will continue to, and I believe that with all my heart. So, and my kids. One of my daughters, the oldest one, is seeing a therapist because we all went through quite a bit of trauma. And she did, as the oldest child, tried to protect the younger one. And I tried to protect them both, but it was just impossible to protect them from everything. There was one time, I'll just give this one example and then I'll quit because I think my time is coming to an end. But there was one time when she was trying to go and get in the car and drive off into a tree or kill herself anyway in a car. And I knew that she was upset. So I tried to get in her way, not to get in the car. She was able to push past me and get in the car, get the car started and lock the doors so I couldn't get in. She was backing out of the car and I had to jump on the hood just to get her to stop. The girls were looking out the window as she backed out and went into the driveway with me flopping around on the hood. And I finally was able to get her to stop and get her back into the house and talk her down, which was a regular thing. Talk her out of panic attacks, talk her just down from despair or whatever. But the girls saw that, and they saw other things. When she went through electroshock treatment, we didn't see her going through the treatment, but we went to the hospital to visit her, and they knew what was going on. And I say I was transparent. I really was, and I think that was to my benefit that I was as transparent as I was. But I also learned not to be transparent all the time. There was one time I just kind of was too transparent in church when I was leading worship, and I shared and I just broke down crying, and I think people were worried about me. So you probably need to be a little bit more choosy on who you share some of your deepest things with. But because I was transparent, I had a lot of people love on me. They did not know how to love on her, but they did on me. And when she passed away, we had a lot of people at the funeral because they were there to support me. And so God has been good. He's used us and our family, and I pray he will continue to.
Wow, Steve, thank you so much. I don't know what to say, but thank you. I needed to hear that today because I'm taking care of my mother, and she is a difficult person. And I needed to hear you say that God will hold you. Oh, okay. Let's see. I think we have one. Oh, just a comment. Someone wanted to just bless you, Steve, and praise God for seeing you through. And I'm sure everyone who's on this call is feeling the same way. Okay, hard to transition. But now we're going to talk about taxes, which is also a painful topic. How about that transition? Was that pretty good? Okay, Mark is going to share with us a little bit about topics that affect widows and their families having to do with our taxes. And I'm going to give you the stage, Mark. Go for it.
All right. Well, thank you, Leanne. And I would like to share my screen if I can, but it says that it's disabled. I don't know if you need to make me the host quickly.
Yes,
Actually, Chris is the host, so
he has to make the host.
yeah, I'm not the host. Chris is.
Okay. Hopefully
Let me just make sure.
he's still on.
He sometimes doesn't stay on the call,
Oh,
so.
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm here. I'm just working on it here. I don't know if I can do that on the fly here. Let's see.
Well, while you're working on that, Chris, I'll give my little commercial. I wanted to let all of you know that Wings for Widows, we had planned to have a benefit this fall on October 8th. Very excited. I was going to do the flowers at Interlochen Country Club, and obviously, pandemic. We're not going to be able to have this lovely dinner, but the door has opened so that we can do a video production, and we're going to hold our benefit as a live video. So mark your calendars for 7 o'clock on the 8th of October for this wonderful event. And the carrot on the stick is that if you listen to the call, you will be entered to win a trip to Hawaii with a $2,000 voucher to use for airfare or whatever else you want to use it for. So it's the Big Island of Hawaii, a beautiful resort on the Hilton property. So it's worth listening to our wonderful Zoom call. And if any of you are familiar with Triple Espresso, our host is Michael Pierce Donnelly from Triple Espresso. So it'll be a fun evening with music and testimonies, and I think it'll be worthwhile. And you could even have a little party and listen to it with a group of friends. So hope you'll do that. Mark it down on your calendar. We'll be obviously sending lots more information about that soon. All right, Chris, are we good?
Mark, are we good?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, then I'll shut up.
Wonderful. Can you all see that?
Sure can.
Hopefully it's sharing the right screen. Is it full screen on your end?
It is.
Okay.
You're good to go.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for still being here to listen to taxes, and thank you, Steve. Thanks so much for sharing your story, and I'm just grateful to be here. I sit in the treasurer seat for Wings for Widows. I've just been, very grateful for every chance I've had to help in any way I can. Got to know Chris about a year ago and felt called or pulled to find ways for, whether it's Ellingson & Ellingson, the firm I work for, or ways in the community that I can be of help for those in need. So what I'd like to do is just share a few topics I see and we end up seeing every year when it comes to someone who's lost their loved one, and some of the tax implications that we see, just so that you can hopefully shed some light on it for planning for yourself, planning for those around you, and just put items in your mind to show you, there's things that come up either the year after that you should just be aware of. So what I'd like to do to start is really start with some of the major items that we see change, and I'm going to just set the scene for a story of Robert and Dorothy. They were my grandparents, both passed away just last year, and really using them as an inspiration for the story we see every year for our with clients, with people in our lives. But Robert was an accountant. I must have gotten some of my accounting from him. Dorothy was a nurse. My mom is a nurse, but it's actually my dad's parents, and so he ended up marrying a nurse, and so that's kind of run in as a caregiver in our family. But they had 6 kids in their lives, and just in the past few years, Robert's health began to deteriorate after retiring, and things happened where Dorothy ended up spending probably similar to Steve, where in the last 2 years, where really Dorothy's role was to be a caregiver, and Robert, in the story, he passes away in December of 2019. So just last year, end of the year, in December 2019. And so when we look at this scenario, obviously we have in 2019 where they were married and their filing status there. But when you look forward into this year in 2020, what may change? And some of those items are filing status, which I'll talk about, and how that impacts other items such as Social Security benefits, taxes, and Medicare. And it's something that was written into the tax law, and I don't know why, but there are really some implications that come about once one loses their loved one. And the best way to deal with it is just make sure you're aware, make sure you plan. So what happened, like I mentioned, is they both retired. Robert 72, Dorothy 70, and Robert passed away in December 2019. So they're both taking Social Security at this time. They both have retirement distributions, so you have retirement income. And just from a simplicity standpoint, we're just going to focus on those pieces and how it all aligns into what happens on the tax side. So in 2019, in their scenario, is that they filed jointly since Robert was alive in 2019, and the IRA income, so retirement income that they took, $100,000. Robert had a larger Social Security income, so he had $30,000 from Social Security benefits, while Dorothy was lower at $20,000. So in 2019, you can see their total income is, you add those all up, $150,000. And from a tax standpoint, we're looking at just under $18,000 for federal taxes. So from a tax rate, it's fairly low compared to our tax rates. But in 2020, we see a very quick shift there. So in 2020, actually, the filing status shifts to single. And with that, there's some domino effects that play into Dorothy's situation. Is her IRA income this year is $100,000. While her Social Security benefits, they used to have Robert's of 30, hers of 20. They now only have hers where she gets to take the benefit of his, so she's now at 30. So we've lost 20,000 of Social Security benefits, but you'll notice that their taxes for Dorothy are actually higher than they were when they filed jointly. So we've dropped, and I'll just for an illustration here, is that total income on the left-hand side in 2019, filing jointly, $150,000, the federal tax of 17 and change. And in 2020, while she still needs the same amount to live off of, she no longer has that additional Social Security benefit. She now has federal taxes larger, and so we have $20,000 drop in income, a $3,600 increase in taxes. And this is something Leanne had mentioned even just in an email, I think a couple weeks ago, when she was talking about this and some of the other items that play out, is that knowing what may be coming, or for those around you what may be coming, and just letting them know that you'll need to plan, and are there ways to mitigate some of these impacts as well. So one other item that does happen as well is Medicare premiums. And I think this was actually the specific note that Leanne had, was in this scenario, we saw income drop, but what you would also see is a change is that Dorothy's Medicare premiums taken out of her Social Security benefit every month would have been $144.60 in 2021. So that's based on her 2019 income. But then in 2022, since she's single now in 2020, her Medicare premiums are going to double. And that's because her income is now based on single. So since she now files single, that those Medicare thresholds now change to where Medicare premiums can go up without you even knowing. And it's because of the change from joint to single. So just to clarify that point is your 2021 Medicare premiums would be based on your 2019 income. Your 2022 Medicare premiums would be based on your 2020 income. And it's also not only based on income, but if you're filing single or filing jointly. So that's really the piece I wanted to note there is Dorothy will also be paying an additional $1,700 in Medicare premiums 2 years later, just because of the fact that it's single now as the tax status. So really, this is considered in the tax world the widow tax. And so what we've seen is a decrease in income because of lost Social Security benefits, an increase in income tax, and an increase in Medicare premiums. And this is something I think needs to get changed. Obviously, it hasn't. It's something people could bring up to those in local legislation or Congress and find ways to change these laws. But what we see every year is those impacted by this. From my standpoint, though, the question becomes, what can we do to help? And where I'd say is the best place to start is, first off, know where you were. Know when you were filing last, where you sat. Understand what may have changed, which hopefully this presentation helps give some insight into, and then identify any ways, if possible, to better your situation. So in Dorothy's situation, she was filing jointly. They used to have 2 Social Security benefits. We talked about this, but know where they what may have changed. And this is where you're changing from joint to single, changing from 2 benefits to 1. You'll also notice how we highlighted, and I may have to, I don't know if you can see my little laser pointer over there, but when they were filing jointly, they were in the 22% tax bracket. And this chart really illustrates, once you're single, those tax brackets shrink up to about half the size. So now Dorothy falls into the 24% tax bracket here on the left-hand side. And that's something that changes once you go from joint to single. The last piece, and this is something that I think is the most important, is identifying ways to better your situation. This can be using a CPA, talking to those around you, but are there ways to reduce the taxable income? Or if you're in a scenario where you're filing jointly, or at this point, are there ways to take advantage of those joint brackets? But beyond that point, charitable donations and making those out of your IRA are ways to reduce income from a Medicare standpoint. So making what they call a qualified charitable distribution out of your IRA is something you can ask financial advisors about, CPAs about. I'd be happy to help anyone with any questions after this. And then the last piece is, if there's questions or concerns you have, find ways to have a tax projection done. Really the best way maybe, you can try to calculate it on your own, but going to those around you to figure out, how much should I have withheld from my retirement account and distributions? How much should I have withheld from Social Security benefits? Finding ways just so that you can avoid an April 15th surprise that we see all too often. But what I'd like to really finish with is, if anyone on this call has questions, they can feel free to send me an email. I only had my business email on here, but I am with Wings for Widows, and you can reach out to Wings for Widows and and I'd be happy to help with just any tax related questions on this item. But I just thank you for your time and listening. And if there's questions, feel free to ask them now.
We have, what is a qualifying widow? I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Qualifying widow, that's a great question. I think, well, I'm assuming it's based on a tax status, which is qualifying widow. And I tried to condense it into one item we see, and maybe I'll have to come on for another tax conversation too to describe qualifying widow. But in order to be a qualifying widow, you also need, this would be 2 years, the 2 years following the date of death of your spouse. So spouse passes away in 2019, they could qualify as a qualifying widow in 2020 and 2021. And in those 2 years, they would have more of the married filing jointly tax brackets. In order to qualify for that, though, they need to have a dependent. So it would have to be either a qualifying child, a dependent, so someone who they care for within their house, usually whether it's 18 and under, whether high school student, but in college too, if they're in college, you could still potentially qualify for that filing status that's available. Any other questions? And I'm probably, not sharing my screen anymore, I don't think, right? Hopefully not.
Yeah, we do have time if there are people that want to ask a question, if it's not too, if it's general enough that it will benefit everyone, not about your particular situation.
Right, yep. And as I mentioned, if you have more particular questions, you can feel free to send me an email too.
And I have to tell you, Mark gets back to you right away. It's amazing. I'm kind of used to people not getting back to me for days, and then they go off my radar. He gets back to you like the next day.
You're putting too much pressure on me now.
Oh.
No, I really try to. I try to get back as soon as I can.
Yeah. Well, it's an awesome privilege to have you with us on Wings for Widows board, and the fact that you are so responsive and great with helping people, really appreciate it. So
yeah, thank you. It's an honor to speak here, so thank you.
thanks. Well, I don't see any questions coming on or people giving a high sign, so I'm going to go ahead and just close the evening. Thank you very much, especially Steve and Mark, for giving us your time and just really enriching our lives and helping us to understand some things that I'm sure we all benefited from. And I do want to make sure you know a little bit about our next speaker. Really he's kind of a, what do you call it, a trifecta, only he's just two. So whatever that is. Nate Ostertag is one of our, he's one of our Wings for Widows financial coaches. He is a certified financial planner, and also he's a widower, and he has 6 kids. So he's a pretty amazing guy, and he is going to be talking with us next week. His topic is decision making in uncertain times. And he's going to share a little bit of his story, the difficulty of making important decisions when you're newly widowed. I'm sure those of you who have experienced that. It's one of the reasons that we started Wings for Widows, because of the fog, that even capable people have a difficult time making decisions when they're going through a severe grief and trauma. And then his secondary topic, he's going to actually do both sides of the conversation next time, is behavioral finance. Now, this is a term I hadn't heard before, but it's how to use non-financial realities of life to craft an appropriate wealth management strategy. So I think he's going to talk about risk and things like that that are kind of useful topics to learn about as you are making decisions about your future. So I think it's going to be a very rich evening, and I hope you'll sign up. It's August 12th, so 2 Wednesdays from now, and we'll be looking forward to that. We'll be sending out invitations shortly. So thank you for attending. Chris, did you want to say something?
I did, but I got some strange feedback. But I was just going to say there's more to this story with Nate.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Well, Nate and I, we got our MBAs together at Carlson. That's where we met. And while I was at Carlson, I was with Coca-Cola, and he was with Ameriprise. He was the one who talked me into leaving the world that I
Oh,
was
I didn't
in
know that.
and joining financial services. And if it wasn't for Nate getting me into financial services, you and I never would have met. So kind of an interesting backstory to Nate Ostertag. So he's got a wonderful story to tell. And I encourage everyone to join next week.
Thank you. I didn't know that. So that's really interesting. Okay. Well, the Lord moves in mysterious ways. Thank you, everyone, for attending this evening. I hope you were blessed.
Thanks, Leanne. Bye-bye.
Good night.